Hi, welcome. We're just trying to address some issues with this drift car. This is an Atomic DRZ3 MP, and it sucks. But it doesn't suck because it's an Atomic car. It sucks because it wasn't set up right, and we're trying to determine what is wrong with the setup and how to make it drift better. I didn't want to compare anything until I finished a build of my own. I bought this one used and I wanted to try it out. This was before I was with Atomic, and now I got this one and I built this one myself, and it slides beautifully. This car is brilliant. It has good steering angle, it has good bounce front and rear, and now there are some hop-ups on here, but nothing that you would need to put into this. A lot of this stuff looks really good, but may not make a huge difference in drifting. This one here, tonight, we're gonna figure out a way to see if we can get this on a budget. It's got Atomic's cheapest servo, Atomic's cheapest motor, and they're good pieces. You don't need to put super expensive stuff in. You can drift and have fun on a budget. Let's see what we can do to make this change. All right, what are the differences? What don't I like about this one, or what do I need to change about this one to make it feel more like this one? For starters, and the Atomic instructions say this, is you gotta look for binding anywhere. And this car is full of binding. The plastic ball cups, some of the other parts on this car just don't flow and move smoothly, where this one doesn't have any binding. First example is the bounce in the rear end and the bounce in the front end. That's because things are moving freely. Now this one has two problems that are wrecking the bounce that you're getting out of this. And bounce doesn't determine much other than the fact that you've got suspension moving the way it should. So the lack of bounce here tells me that there's binding. This is also set up like a road race car. You can see that this chassis is very low to the ground as to where this one's really high. Drift cars are not road race cars, and you need some height underneath them so the body and the chassis can roll well. So first, let's try adjusting the ride height of the car. Atomic makes it real easy. There are these little shock adjusters, as you can see right up here on the front and the rear. And I've put a considerable amount of preload on the spring now. And it's getting better. You always want to make sure that your preload side to side is the same as a good starting point. You don't want your car to be lopsided. Okay, so now the only thing that we have done is adjusted the spring rate, adjusting these little coils right here on all four corners. And if you look at them, now you get decent suspension movement. And this is how I bought that kit. I wanted to make sure that I didn't make any changes so you guys could see this in real time. And now you can see this one has considerably more movement, but this one's getting there. And if I turn it around to the front, you'll see the same thing. Remember, this is the same car. Better movement. Doesn't quite flop around yet, but it will. The next thing I want you guys to see is the binding in this front end. Now I have removed the servo horn, and this requires just a tremendous amount of effort to physically turn. I wish this would translate in video how stiff this is, but it's stiff. Also, this side-to-side motion, which is this beautiful part that Atomic has made to keep this car sitting level, is bound up too. It's either in this pivot or it's in the ball cups and the lower control arms. We got a little bit of binding in each of these wheels. They're just not, at this point, with these disconnected, these should flop. How do we make them flop? The best thing you can do is take a pliers like this and give these lower ball joints just a little squeeze. So after taking the pliers and squeezing on these ball joints like this, you just give them a little squeeze. You don't squeeze super hard because you'll actually break the ball joint. But what that does is that loosens up the front end to where these wheels can really flop around. Now you can see now, just by setting the car down, it pushes the wheels forward. That is a good sign. That means things are starting to get freed up. The next is this pivot here. Now, this pivot should also flop, and it's not. You see how I'm pushing it? You can see it's just sticky. I believe that it might be this screw right here. It might be over tight. I'm gonna loosen that up. Look at that. See if I can, look at that. From being clicky, it's falling under its own weight. The next thing is each individual ball joint plastic cup. You can see where I put this, it stays. It should also flop around like these. So the same thing that you did on the bottom of the car, you're gonna do to every one of these ball joint cups. Look at that. See how it just flops around now? Again, I can't show you this through the camera, but this moves so much easier now. It actually is getting real floppy. That is gonna make everything so much easier. Next thing I'm gonna address is this servo horn. I'm gonna put this back on here and show you the steering angle that this has. I've got my controller set at 120% of its ability to turn. Now this isn't the arm that Atomic supplies, this is the arm that comes with the servo. And I'm gonna move it up to the end and stick it right back on and see what we get for steering angle. Now that is night and day better. And that's without adjusting any camber, which would be up here, any of the caster angle, which is adjustable right here, fore and aft, or changing any of the links. This is just automatically considerably better steering angle. So we're gonna keep going with that, and I'm gonna pull in some of these other adjustments to see. The toe is a little off. I wanna see what I can get done there to get things to be more equal. You want to have your steering end stop equal on either side. You need to have your toe as close to even on both sides as you can. That way it drifts well, both left and right. Now I've got the steering servo pulled all the way back as far as I can in the adjustment that Atomic gives you. And look at the difference just by leaving it centered. If I push it forward, look what it does to the wheels. Automatically tows it out. And if I pull it back and go lock to lock, you can see I've got pretty good steering angle. But if I'm sitting lock and I push it forward, look how much it changes things. It brings those wheels to a really, really good spot. Looking at what we have done, this angle, look at how free that moves now. Under its own weight, you get good bounce from the car, both sides. And you have suspension that is now working. This piece here is important. Atomic put it in so when you rotate the car, when you're twisting that suspension like that, you always have the same amount of pressure on all four wheels. If you didn't have that piece in there, or if that piece was bound up, you would have too much pressure from side to side, which would make the car spin out drifting to one side and maybe drift really slow going to the other side. Either way, you would think it would be your problem and you didn't know how to drift, or you didn't like drifting, or at that point in time, you would just pack up the whole thing and throw it away and go back to your off-road buggy and play around in the dirt. Okay, so here it is drifting, and I feel confident driving it now that I can take it all the way to the edge of this table without letting it fly off. And when I get right up to the edge of the table, I feel like I can drop the tire right off and come back and recover with it. As I have the car stopped here, look at the steering angle. I feel confident that I can go lock to lock with this thing and slide as long as my ability allows. It moves super smooth now because the front end is freed up. Also, when I throw it into a drift, I feel like I can pull out of it at any point in time with the added steering angle that you got from putting the servo horn in the right spot. I mean, look at that right now. Look at that slide. I can control that as far as I want to. there you go, folks. This is a used car that I bought and put budget parts into it, and I got it to drift very, very well. It was a matter of freeing up some binding parts. It was a matter of setting up the steering angles and the geometry, and it was a matter of making sure your springs were set up. And you have a car that you can drift and have a lot of fun with. Don't let an improper setup ruin your idea of what drifting is, because it is a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy it.